Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Eva had betrayed her own mother to help Ted prevent Leslie from buying a new house, and this shocking act of disloyalty sets the tone for an unraveling chain of betrayals, half-truths, and subtle manipulations. It is not simply a story about property or inheritance, it is a story about family ties strained to the breaking point, about trust corroded from within, and about how bitterness can hollow out love until it becomes unrecognizable. At the heart of the story is Leslie, a woman whose abrasiveness has alienated nearly everyone around her. She is a character who is neither fully villain nor fully victim. Her rudeness and cutting remarks push others away, but underneath that sharp surface there is a wounded soul, carrying years of losses and disappointments. Yet, when everyone turns against her, the audience begins to ask whether she truly deserves the cruelty and coordinated sabotage she is forced to endure. Eva's role is crucial here. For a daughter to take part in a plot against her own mother is not just betrayal, it is the collapse of one of the most sacred bonds. Eva's motivations, though presented as pragmatic and even protective, quickly blur into self-interest, resentment, and a desperate wish for liberation from Leslie's suffocating influence. Ted, standing alongside Eva, becomes more than just a brother-in-law entangled in real estate drama. He symbolizes the pressure of the outside world encroaching upon the fragile internal dynamic of this family. His determination to block Leslie's purchase of the house is driven not just by financial considerations but also by a deep-seated desire to protect his own family's stability. Leslie, in his eyes, is a storm that could devastate their fragile peace. And so he enlists Eva's help, perhaps knowing that her complicated love-hate relationship with her mother makes her the perfect ally. But alliances forged on resentment rarely hold without consequences, and the cracks in this one begin to show immediately. Vanessa, meanwhile, plays the role of the quiet manipulator. By secretly altering the purchase contract to prevent Leslie from moving into her new house for 3 months, Vanessa demonstrates a cunning precision that Eva herself lacks. Where Eva acts out of emotion, both love and frustration, Vanessa acts with cold calculation. She creates a delay not simply to inconvenience Leslie but to weaken her psychologically, to erode her resolve and her sense of independence. To be denied a home, to have freedom dangled just out of reach, is a crueler punishment than open confrontation. This collective hostility drives Leslie into social exile. Once tolerated, if not embraced, she becomes the subject of whispers, avoided at gatherings, subtly erased from the community. The perception of her as rude and meddling becomes a justification for cruelty, and people who once smiled politely now turn their faces away. What makes this descent more harrowing is the knowledge that her own daughter, Eva, is participating in this campaign against her. Every mother's nightmare is not abandonment by strangers but betrayal by her own flesh and blood. And yet, there had been a time when Eva reached out with words of genuine care. She advised Leslie to take her inheritance money and use it to live well, to savor what life had to offer rather than expending energy on bitterness, gossip, and antagonism. Eva's plea was simple: stop fixating on others. Stop trying to control lives that are not yours, and instead find a measure of happiness for yourself. She even framed the inheritance as a kind of cosmic compensation, a balm for the wounds Leslie had carried for years. But Leslie, blinded by her need to assert control, rejected this advice outright. To her, Eva's words sounded like dismissal, like a shallow prescription that failed to understand the depth of her pain. And in that rejection lies the seed of their growing divide. Leslie insists that Eva cannot possibly understand what it means to live with her scars, her disappointments, her years of being overlooked. In doing so, she dismisses her daughter's experience entirely, failing to see that Eva, too, carries her own burdens. This inability to bridge perspectives deepens their rift until both women stand on opposite sides, each convinced the other is blind. With Ted and Vanessa succeeding in their delay tactics, the stage is set for an extended war of attrition. Leslie is denied her house, and now Thomas enters the picture, supporting Eva in an even more insidious way. He helps devise strategies to prolong the waiting period before Leslie can access the next installment of her inheritance. Money, here, is not just currency, it is time, freedom, leverage. To cut Leslie off from it is to suffocate her independence, to reduce her ability to maneuver. It is not only financial sabotage but a deliberate assault on her autonomy. What makes this campaign so excruciating for Leslie is not merely the obstacles themselves but the realization that the people orchestrating them are her family. For a woman already ostracized by the community, discovering that her own daughter conspires against her is a wound deeper than any public rejection. Her pain becomes raw, not theatrical but real. The kind that strips a person down to their most vulnerable state. She confronts Eva directly, demanding explanations for the sudden instability in her finances and the obstacles surrounding her inheritance. This confrontation is not one of casual irritation, it is one of desperation, of a mother who feels the ground being pulled out from under her feet by the one person she once believed she could count on. Eva, however, does not explain. Silence, in this context, is more cutting than words. She avoids detailing the schemes, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of fear that speaking the truth would confirm Leslie's worst suspicions. Instead, she couches her betrayal in the language of care. She insists that everything she is doing for Leslie's own good. She urges her mother to let go of Ted and his family, to stop inserting herself into battles that are not hers to fight. Her voice trembles not just with guilt but with a strange conviction that by breaking her mother down, she might force her into a new way of living. This moment of Eva begging Leslie to live for herself is emotionally layered. On one level, it is a genuine plea for her mother to seek joy, to release the bitterness that has consumed her. On another level, it is self-serving, a way for Eva to remove herself from the cycle of resentment and conflict that has defined her relationship with her mother. In asking Leslie to let go, she is asking for liberation not just for Leslie but for herself. Leslie's response is heartbreakingly ambiguous. She admits she does not know if she can do what Eva asks. Her words tremble between hope and despair, between the yearning to change and the inertia of lifelong habits. This hesitation reveals her humanity. She is not a caricature of stubbornness. She is a woman aware of her flaws but paralyzed by them. She understands, at least dimly, that she is her own worst enemy, but change feels as impossible as tearing down walls built over decades. And so, the battle lines harden. Leslie, though wounded, refuses to relinquish her defiance entirely. Eva, torn between guilt and determination, doubles down on her choices. Ted and Vanessa continue their machinations, each rationalizing that their cruelty is justified by the need to protect their own peace. Thomas adds another layer of strategy, turning what began as a personal feud into something resembling a siege. But beneath all of this, there is an undercurrent of tragedy. The story is no longer about whether Leslie gets to move into a house. It is about whether this family can ever repair the fractures they have inflicted upon one another. Each act of sabotage pushes them further from reconciliation, and every justification they give themselves chips away at the possibility of forgiveness. The audience is left questioning not only what will happen next but also whether anyone in this family can truly claim innocence. The drama intensifies as Leslie begins to piece together the scope of the conspiracy against her. She may be abrasive, but she is not stupid. She notices inconsistencies, unexplained delays, sudden obstacles that cannot all be coincidences. Her anger shifts from outward bluster to inward suspicion, and she begins to confront people more directly. The isolation she endures sharpens her focus. Without allies, she becomes more dangerous, more desperate, and more willing to fight back. This transformation is crucial because it sets the stage for the next phase of conflict, where Leslie is no longer just the victim but a force willing to retaliate. Yet even as Leslie steels herself, the wound inflicted by Eva's betrayal refuses to close. Every time she looks at her daughter, she sees not just blood but treachery. She sees someone who once stood at her side now standing in her way. This emotional fracture is the real tragedy, for even if houses are bought and inheritances spent, the scar of a mother-daughter betrayal cannot be so easily erased. As events continue to spiral, the audience is left with a sense of unease. The battle over property, inheritance, and social standing has become secondary to the psychological warfare tearing this family apart. Love and loyalty are not only questioned but weaponized, turned into tools of manipulation and control. And somewhere in the midst of all this, each character must confront not just what they have done but what they have become. Underneath the fractures already carved into this family, tension continues to grow like cracks in glass that has not yet shattered. Leslie, bruised by betrayal and humiliated by the orchestrated delays, begins to turn inward, stewing on every slight with a sharpened bitterness that burns hotter each day. She walks through familiar streets and feels the weight of eyes on her, the silent judgment of neighbors who no longer see her as complicated but human. They see only the caricature of rudeness and disruption. The loneliness gnaws at her, and while she lashes out in anger, inside she is breaking. What she cannot endure is the thought that Eva, her own daughter, has taken her place among those who reject her. Eva, meanwhile, is haunted by the confrontation with her mother. She replays the image of Leslie's face when she admitted she did not know if she could live differently, if she could let go. For a fleeting moment, Eva saw vulnerability in her mother, and that softening lingers in her mind. Yet the choices she has made cannot be easily undone. She is too deep in the schemes with Ted and Vanessa, and Thomas continues to urge her forward, insisting that weakening Leslie now will ensure peace for everyone later. Eva tells herself she is protecting both sides, her mother and her in-laws, but in reality, she is trapped in a cycle of justifying betrayals that no longer feel righteous. Ted feels none of the guilt. He sees Leslie as a destabilizing threat and believes every action taken against her is warranted. His priority is his wife, his family, and the sanctuary of his household. In his mind, Leslie represents intrusion, an unwanted presence looming at the edges of their lives, threatening to pull everyone into chaos. That belief hardens him, and though he notices Eva's hesitation at times, he pressures her to stay aligned with him. In his pragmatic worldview, there is no room for reconciliation with Leslie, only the necessity of keeping her at bay. Vanessa continues to operate with precision, her actions carefully hidden behind a veneer of innocence. She relishes the success of her contractual interference, and the 3-month delay becomes a symbol of her control. Unlike Eva, she feels no emotional conflict. Where Eva wavers between love and betrayal, Vanessa's approach is clear and cold. She believes that stripping Leslie of power is the only way to neutralize her. What begins as a pragmatic maneuver slowly evolves into something darker. Vanessa starts to take satisfaction in Leslie's isolation, a private victory over a woman she views as corrosive. Thomas, ever the strategist, sees the entire situation as a game of endurance. His role in managing Leslie's inheritance delays gives him quiet influence, and he pushes Eva with subtle encouragements, reminding her that time is their greatest weapon. The longer Leslie is kept waiting, the weaker she becomes. Thomas rationalizes his involvement as support for Eva, but beneath that lies ambition. He enjoys the power that comes with controlling the flow of resources, and his interest is no longer just about helping. Eva begins to see how Leslie's fall could elevate his own position in ways not yet spoken aloud. For Leslie, the betrayal sharpens her instincts. She begins to sense Thomas's hand in the inheritance complications, recognizing that her daughter alone could not have orchestrated such delays. Her suspicion grows, and though she lacks proof, she feels the walls closing in. At first, her instinct is to lash out, to confront loudly and publicly, but isolation has changed her. Instead, she becomes watchful, choosing to bide her time. The story of Leslie's decline shifts as she slowly transitions from a loud disruptor to a calculating opponent. The bitterness does not vanish, it condenses, focusing her attention on those who have hurt her most. This shift unsettles Eva. She notices her mother's silence, the way Leslie's eyes linger longer in conversation, as though measuring every word, every breath. Gone is the predictably sharp tongue that once made Leslie so easy to dismiss. Now, there is caution, an unnerving quiet. Eva begins to fear what her mother is planning, even as she continues to play her part in Ted and Vanessa's schemes. The guilt gnaws at her, and every day she feels herself pulled in two directions: toward loyalty to the family she has allied herself with, and toward a fragile, lingering duty to her mother. Vanessa, by contrast, welcomes the change. She interprets Leslie's silence as defeat, a sign that the campaign is working. She doubles down, tightening the restrictions in subtle ways, preparing to extend the delay if necessary. Her belief that Leslie is breaking under pressure blinds her to the possibility that Leslie is merely adapting. Ted grows impatient, concerned that 3 months may not be enough to rid themselves of Leslie's interference. He pressures Vanessa and Eva to ensure that Leslie has no way of recovering, no way of buying her way into proximity. This insistence begins to wear on Eva, who can no longer escape the gnawing realization that she is playing a role in destroying her mother's sense of identity. Thomas continues to whisper strategies, but in the shadows of these conversations, he begins to plan for himself. By aligning with Eva, he has gained influence, but he knows influence can only last as long as Leslie remains weakened. He contemplates ways to ensure that Leslie never fully regains her footing, even if that means severing ties more drastically. Leslie, however, refuses to be destroyed. Her pain becomes the furnace in which her resolve is forged. She begins to plot, thinking carefully about where her strength lies. Though socially isolated, she knows her history, her memories, and her claim to her inheritance cannot be erased so easily. She starts gathering fragments of evidence, piecing together how Vanessa manipulated the contract, how Thomas interfered in her finances, and how Ted positioned himself as the architect of her downfall. Her confrontation with Eva remains the most haunting. Though she yearns to reclaim her daughter, she recognizes that Eva is caught between guilt and loyalty to others. Rather than pushing her further away, Leslie decides to let silence become her weapon. She stops demanding explanations and instead offers small moments of unexpected vulnerability, reminding Eva of the bond they once shared. These subtle shifts destabilize Eva more than shouting ever could, planting doubt in her mind about whether she has chosen the right side. As the weeks drag forward, each character feels the strain of their choices. Ted becomes more controlling, Vanessa more calculating, Thomas more ambitious, Eva more conflicted, and Leslie more dangerous in her quiet determination. The story begins to tilt, preparing for an inevitable eruption when these tensions collide. The unanswered question that hangs over every interaction is not simply whether Leslie will succeed in reclaiming what has been denied her, but whether the fragile threads connecting her to Eva can survive the weight of betrayal. For Eva, the choice grows heavier each day: continue aligning with Ted and Vanessa in their relentless campaign, or step back toward the mother whose flaws she despises but whose love she cannot entirely extinguish. The suspense lies in that uncertainty, in the knowledge that when the final confrontation arrives, there will be no way for all of them to walk away unscathed. The slow-burning war that began with property and inheritance is hurtling toward a reckoning, one that will test not only their loyalties but the very essence of who they are when stripped of excuses. And in that crucible, truth will no longer be avoidable. It will demand to be spoken, no matter how much it destroys. The fractures that had grown wider with each passing day now begin to crack open fully, and the battle that has remained veiled in silence finally threatens to burst into the open. Leslie, who has endured months of deliberate sabotage, delay, and betrayal, no longer hides her resolve. The bitterness that once made her an outcast has transformed into a weapon, and she intends to wield it against those who pushed her to the margins of her own life. What began as a war over houses, inheritances, and influence has become something deeper, a test of loyalty, of family bonds, and of survival. Her first step is to confront the truth head-on. For too long, Eva has avoided explaining herself, hiding behind vague promises that everything she did was for her mother's good. But Leslie is tired of silence. In one of the most piercing moments of their story, she demands to know where Eva's heart lies, with her mother, or with Ted and Vanessa, the ones who orchestrated so much of her pain. The air between them is heavy, each word balanced between accusation and plea. Eva cannot hide from this question anymore. She is cornered by her own guilt, forced to admit that she played a role in holding her mother back. Eva breaks. The weight of her choices comes pouring out, not as a neat confession but as a torrent of contradictions. She insists she wanted to protect her mother, to stop her from wasting her life in constant battles, but also admits she resented Leslie's hold on her, the way every conversation turned sharp, the way every kindness was questioned. Her voice wavers between love and anger, between defense and apology. And in that moment, Leslie sees her daughter not as a betrayer, not as an enemy, but as someone lost between conflicting loyalties. This realization softens her, but not enough to erase the hurt. Ted and Vanessa, watching this fragile thread of reconciliation, know that if Eva drifts back toward her mother, their carefully constructed strategy will crumble. Vanessa in particular feels threatened, her sense of control slipping away. Where Eva sees the chance for forgiveness, Vanessa sees weakness. She reminds Ted that hesitation is dangerous, that Leslie will only use sympathy to manipulate and regain power. Vanessa's coldness becomes sharper, her words edged with cruelty, but behind it lurks fear. She has invested too much in dismantling Leslie to allow even a crack of vulnerability to undo her work. Thomas, always observing from the shadows, senses the shifting ground and begins recalculating. His loyalty has never been to Leslie, nor fully to Eva, has always been to himself. And now, as alliances threaten to shift, he begins to consider whether siding with Leslie might serve him better in the end. After all, a woman scorned by everyone has little left to lose, and Thomas sees in her desperation a dangerous strength. If she rises again, she will remember who stood with her, and if she falls completely, he can quietly step away. For him, the game is not about loyalty but about survival. Leslie, emboldened by Eva's faltering defenses, begins to fight back openly. She speaks to neighbors, to old acquaintances, even to those who once dismissed her, carefully planting seeds of doubt about Ted and Vanessa's integrity. She knows her reputation is already damaged, but she also knows how to use the truth like a scalpel. Her claims are too specific to ignore: delayed inheritances, altered contracts, subtle manipulations that only someone intimately involved could describe. Her campaign is not loud but persistent, and slowly the whispers that once condemned her begin to turn toward those who thought themselves untouchable. The house, once the focal point of this struggle, now becomes symbolic of something greater. For Leslie, it represents independence and dignity, the ability to stand on her own without bowing to anyone. For Ted and Vanessa, it represents intrusion and instability, a threat to their carefully curated peace. For Eva, it represents choice, whether to support her mother's bid for freedom or continue standing with those who fear her presence. The climax comes not in courtrooms or contracts but around a family table, where all of them gather for what appears to be one final confrontation. Words fly like arrows: Ted's sharp pragmatism, Vanessa's icy disdain, Thomas's quiet provocations, Leslie's wounded fury, and Eva's desperate attempts to hold the threads together. Accusations that were once whispered are spoken aloud. Vanessa's manipulation of the contract is laid bare. Thomas's role in prolonging the inheritance delays is exposed. Ted's relentless campaign to keep Leslie away is admitted without shame. The silence that follows is suffocating, each of them forced to see what they have become. Eva is the one who breaks it. Tears in her eyes, she admits that she cannot keep choosing sides while pretending it is for someone else's good. She tells them all that every one of them has been cruel, every one of them has justified betrayal in the name of protection or stability. Her voice trembles but grows stronger as she declares that she refuses to live in a family defined only by sabotage and distrust. Whether or not Leslie can change, Eva refuses to be part of destroying her completely. For Leslie, these words are both balm and wound. She sees her daughter standing with her, but she also sees the damage that has been done. The bond between them is scarred, fragile, perhaps never fully mendable. Yet there is hope in that scar, proof that something remains. Ted and Vanessa recoil, their alliance cracking under the weight of exposure. For them, victory was only possible in silence. Once their actions are named aloud, they lose their power. Vanessa seethes, but Ted's face shows something closer to resignation. He knows the war cannot continue without tearing everyone apart beyond repair. Thomas, ever the survivor, slips away from the confrontation, already recalculating what this new alignment will mean for him. His role as strategist is finished. What remains is a family forced to reckon with the wreckage of what they have done to one another. The ending is not neat. Leslie does not suddenly become beloved, nor do Ted and Vanessa transform into sympathetic figures. But there is a shift, a fragile possibility. Eva chooses to stand by her mother, Not blindly, not without acknowledging her flaws, but with a quiet insistence that family cannot survive if betrayal becomes the only language they speak. The house, the money, the inheritance, soul of it becomes secondary to the single truth that lingers: they have hurt each other deeply, and only honesty offers any path forward. The final image is one of uneasy quiet. Leslie, still scarred by betrayal, looks at Eva and sees not salvation but a chance. Fragile and uncertain, Eva, exhausted by the war, clings to the hope that even fractured love can still be love. Ted and Vanessa retreat, wounded but not destroyed, while Thomas vanishes into the shadows, already searching for his next advantage. Nothing is fully resolved, but everything is exposed, and in that exposure lies the beginning of whatever comes next.